The following program contains graphic images and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
On Sunday, June 12, 1994, the temperature in Los Angeles will get up to 77 degrees. NBA fans will watch on TV as the Houston Rockets win Game 3 of the NBA Finals, beating the New York Knicks 93-89. Gas at the pump is $1.09, and the stock market stands at $3,783. On the morning of that day, two people with a long, wrenching history of domestic violence wake up in Los Angeles. Though divorced, they've talked about getting back together. On this day, one of them is not ready to let go. The other is committed to moving on. What they can't know is that a forgotten pair of glasses will thrust a third person into their lives on this day. In the end, the result of that encounter will be devastating to them, to their families. And it leads to a trial that becomes a national obsession, a trial that underscores the racial divide in this country. O.J. Simpson was acquitted of the brutal double murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown and her friend Ron Goldman. The verdict exposed deep racial divisions in this country that still exist today. Over the years, many have tried to explain the Simpson case, but we at Court TV believe the best explanation of what actually happened is the trial itself. I'm Roger Cossack, and this is OJ25. From the beginning, it is referred to as the trial of the century. The people's case? O.J. Simpson killed his ex-wife Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. The timeline works. The evidence is clear. The defense? Simpson has been framed. Investigators were incompetent, biased, and rushed to judgment in a way that underscores a history of systemic problems within the LAPD. But before there are attorneys, before any courtroom moments, and before any of the nonstop news coverage, there's a story of murder. Two victims brutally killed on the night of June 12, 1994. Their bodies are discovered on the walkway leading up to Nicole's condo in Brentwood.
The crime itself was about as horrific as you can imagine.
There was so much blood. You have to remember that Nicole was nearly decapitated and bled out on the sidewalk. Ron was stabbed a couple dozen times, and there was lots of blood. And it was a very small area, and there were two little kids, her little kids, sleeping upstairs.
The brutal murders occur in the upscale Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles, a safe place where wealthy people live, with manicured lawns and a sense of security and quiet.
Where it happened in Brentwood was a very safe community. I mean, you don't expect anything like that to happen there. People always say, that never happens here. That's what people would say about Brentwood.
During that June night, while watching the 10 o'clock news, one of Nicole's neighbors hears a barking dog wailing as if sounding an alarm. Another neighbor decides to take the lost dog for a walk and is led to the bodies of Nicole and Ron. During that same night of June 12th, O.J. Simpson is picked up by a limo at his home on Rockingham Avenue. He takes the red-eye to Chicago for a business trip. Shortly after he arrives, the LAPD calls O.J. and tells him that Nicole has been killed and asks him to come back. They had seen a trail of blood at his house, and when they learn that Simpson is unharmed, they suspect he may have been involved in the murders. He returns to L.A. immediately, the police waiting for him at his home.
He was briefly handcuffed when he was talking to police, and a camera crew that had made their way around to the other part of the property captured it.
Meanwhile, the families of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman are coming to grips with the sudden and awful loss of their loved ones.
First and foremost, Nicole was involved in her children's lives. Nicole was like a hands-on mom.
She looked glamorous, she was beautiful, she was vibrant, she was full of life.
Ron was amazing from practically the day he was born. Always an amazing young man, always kind, always thoughtful. He was Kim's brother and best friend forever.
My brother was coming into his own at 25 years old. The closeness that we shared was undeniable, and that feeling of knowing that you always have someone that has your back. And that didn't change the older we got, and obviously the last act of his life proved that my brother and his soul was a protector.
Today, my office filed murder charges against O.J. Simpson.
Simpson agrees to turn himself in, but he never shows.
When he didn't show up, and then Robert Kardashian, his friend, reads this letter.
I think of my life and feel I've done most of the right things. So why do I end up like this? I can't go on.
The Los Angeles Police Department right now is actively searching for Mr. Simpson.
It's like when the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up, or when the Twin Towers were hit. You know where you were when that happened. It wasn't a chase in a traditional sense. It was O.J. Simpson reportedly in the back seat of a Bronco with a gun to his head, and you'd see people lining the overpasses, "Go, O.J., go," that type of thing, homemade signs, because at this point, O.J. Simpson was still beloved, right? Nobody could believe that he would be a killer. It just didn't seem to make sense.
Mr. Simpson is a wanted murder suspect, 2 counts of murder, a terrible crime.
O.J., wherever you are, for the sake of your family, for the sake of your children, please surrender immediately.
Simpson eventually surrenders to police and is taken into custody. At the time of his arrest, O.J. Simpson is 46 years old, a legendary Heisman Trophy winner, a Pro Football Hall of Famer, a star with movie and TV fame. He has pioneered American advertising as one of the first African Americans to be a spokesperson for a major company. But now, he's a celebrity behind bars. When they meet in 1977, 30-year-old O.J. is married and Nicole is just 18 years old. They have 2 children during their 7-year marriage.
They were very much in love. I mean, they loved each other. They were husband, wife. They did, they traveled together. It was, for a long time, a very good family unit.
But what looks like an ideal marriage is actually a toxic relationship filled with violence.
Nicole? Oh, you still on the line? Yeah. You think he's still gonna hit you? I don't know. He's gonna leave. He just said that. He just said he ain't leaving.
He looked me in the eye and he said, "How can anybody think I'm guilty?" And I said, "OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty."
Alan Dershowitz is just one of a remarkable lineup of top-tier, high-profile lawyers brought in from around the country by Robert Shapiro to defend O.J. Simpson, including the legendary F. Lee Bailey, DNA specialist Barry Scheck, and civil rights litigator Johnny Cochran, a group that comes to be known as the Dream Team.
At this time, do you wish to enter a plea guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Your Honor, at this time, we would request under the law that we have a preliminary hearing as soon as possible.
I knew Johnny Cochran, and I knew Robert Shapiro from our days as undergrads at UCLA. I'd worked for the LA County DA's office and knew several of the prosecutors. After Simpson's arrest, Robert Shapiro asked me to attend a meeting. Almost every top criminal lawyer in Los Angeles was there. I remember Shapiro standing in front of us saying, "We intend to win this case. There will be no plea bargain." None of us thought he had a chance. During the 37 weeks of the trial, I was occasionally made privy to defense strategies and insights that I've never talked about publicly. For example, one thing I feel has never been made clear enough is how Robert Shapiro put his own ego on hold and stepped back from the limelight in the interest of his client, something for which he has never been given full credit. The legal horsepower of the Dream Team brings into focus the role of celebrity in the Simpson case. Not just the fame of the defendant, but the legal resources he is able to afford. During the preliminary hearing and pretrial arguments, it becomes apparent that the prosecution is overmatched and outmaneuvered at almost every turn by the defense. For example, Mark Fuhrman. He is a central figure in making the case for the prosecution as the investigator who says he found a bloody glove at the murder scene and another at O.J. Simpson's house.
As I walked closer and I got oriented to where this noise probably came from, I looked down and I saw a dark object. I was probably still 15, 20 feet away, and I kept walking closer, and then I saw when I was a few feet away that it was a glove.
Initially, and at the time, I felt Mark Fuhrman was a good cop. And I thought he intuitively did some things, particularly at Rockingham, which were the hallmark of a good cop.
It's just business as usual. They made it something else that started ruining my life.
But to underscore how the prosecution is overwhelmed by the Dream Team, listen to how F. Lee Bailey turns Fuhrman's history into something that makes the case for the defense, that O.J. Simpson has been framed.
Once Fuhrman hits the stand, we're able to ask him, don't you hate black people? And haven't you said so on many occasions, and particularly this occasion, after you learned that this defendant had a romantic entanglement with a Caucasian woman? If the only evidence you have that this glove came from O.J. Simpson's home is Detective Mark Fuhrman, that isn't enough evidence to convict a rat, let alone a human being. In addition to that, we have told you in our papers, and perhaps for the first time, that Detective Fuhrman then went on within hours to suppress vital evidence tending to exculpate the defendant. So, if he suppressed evidence and claimed to find incriminating evidence, I think we hardly need go further before we have the right to ask him, and by the way, haven't you said on past occasions that you are in favor of genocide? Because what he really said was, let's put them all in a pile and burn them all. And I haven't heard that come from anyone since Adolf Hitler.
Those are the facts.
That is exactly 180 degrees opposite of the truth.
But you don't want to hear the truth.
So this is false.
I don't have to call anybody a liar.
It's the opposite of what occurred.
That's the problem with them. They always want to label everybody.
Which we know is not true.
We keep hearing about the truth.
Very misleading.
I don't think they can stand the truth.
Again, completely misleading.
They are in for the fight of their lives.
All right, are both sides prepared to go forward, Mr. Cochran?
We are, Your Honor.
Mr. Clark?
Yes, we are, Your Honor.
All right, do the people wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
All right, you may proceed. Mr. Darden?
Did O.J. Simpson really kill Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman? The evidence would show that the answer to the question is yes. O.J. Simpson murdered Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman. Why would he do it? Why would he do it? Not O.J. Simpson, not the O.J. Simpson we think we know.
O.J. Simpson was beloved at the time. He was an icon, a hero.
But that raises another question, and that question is, do you know O.J. Simpson? The face you'll see will be the face of a batterer, a wife beater, an abuser, a controller. He killed her because he couldn't have her. And if he couldn't have her, he didn't want anybody else to have her. So you're going to be hearing evidence regarding domestic abuse, domestic violence, stalking, intimidation, physical abuse, wife beating, public humiliation. The dominant theme throughout their relationship was his control of Nicole Brown. And the evidence would show in this case that this man is an extremely possessive and controlling individual. This is all part of his need to know where she is, to know who she's with, to know what she's doing, to control her. It's control. It's all about control. You'll be hearing evidence regarding an incident that happened on January 1, 1989. The 911 operator received a telephone call from Rockingham. We can hear the sound of a woman being beaten now, right now. And the officers arrived at Rockingham a short time later. And as she ran toward the officers, she was shouting and yelling, "He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me." And the officer said, "Who? Who's going to kill you?" And she said, "OJ is going to kill me." And the officer said, "Mr. Simpson, we're going to have to place you under arrest. It appears that your wife has been beaten." And he responded, "The police have been here 8 times before. And now you're going to arrest me for this?"
She would tell me, she goes, "Denise, you know what? He's going to kill me one day and he's going to get away with it."
Finally, after 17 years, he finally got the message. It finally became clear that she wanted to live her own life.
Christopher Darden grows up just north of San Francisco. He plays high school football and runs track in college. He joins the LA District Attorney's Office in 1980, working in the gangs unit, and then Special Investigations, which oversees cases of criminal activity by public officials and law enforcement. He's 38 years old, with 15 years' experience as a prosecutor when he joins the Simpson prosecution team.
The thing that I remember most about Chris is just how frustrated he would get and how personally he took the trial.
I liked Chris. I thought that he was busting his tail on a day-to-day basis.
I think it's fair to say that I have the toughest job in town today.
Chris Darden was accused of being put on this team because he was African American, not because he's a good lawyer.
Chris Darden, it was a very difficult place to be for someone like him. You know, helped the prosecution develop credibility with the black community and the black jurors. It puts him in a very uncomfortable position because he's sort of on the other team, so to speak.
It wasn't about anything except who committed a double murder. That's what it was about. It wasn't about race.
He was completely closed off, totally cold and unwelcoming, brooding. And then as the trial moved on, Chris softened and opened his heart deeper to my dad and I and our family. Chris and I are still super good friends.
What we've been seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is the public face, the public persona. It is not the actor who is on trial here today, ladies and gentlemen. It is not that public face. It is his other face, the one that Nicole Brown encountered during the last moments of her adult life.
The following program contains graphic images and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
And there he saw a sight that he'll never forget. He saw the body of Nicole Brown lying at the foot of the steps in a pool of blood. What I'm showing you here is a shoe print, again. Right here, heel print, a bloody heel print, and another one here. What you see here is what Officers Risky and Terrazas saw when they arrived at the scene. You can see here the paw prints. P8. Officer Risky went all the way up to the end of the walkway in the bushes to a point where he was able to see at that point that it was not just Nicole, but also Ron.
There was an image that was projected on the screen of my brother's body that I had never seen before. And I remember feeling panic because I didn't know, I'd never seen it. I didn't know what to expect. And then Marcia turned around very quickly and apologized.
We did warn you, ladies and gentlemen, that this was a case that was going to have photographs that would be very, very hard to look at. We have to show you the evidence, and I apologize for the graphic nature of them, but this is the crime that we're here to examine. No one will argue about what the cause of death was for Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown. These are the blood drops at the Bundy location at 875 South Bundy. This blood drop that you see here matches the defendant. 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 You analyze the DNA and you see, can I exclude the suspect? Can I rule him out? Is there anything here inconsistent with the suspect? The glove that was found at the south walkway of the defendant's property at Rockingham revealed blood that was consistent with a mixture of Ron Goldman, Nicole Brown, and the defendant. Over and over again, we asked ourselves, can the defendant be excluded? And over and over and over again, the answer was no. The defendant cannot be excluded.
Marcia Clark grows up outside Oakland, California. At 17, she is attacked and raped, something she later says influenced her decision to become a prosecutor. After law school, she works briefly as a defense attorney before joining the LA District Attorney's Office in 1981. By the time she takes on the Simpson case, she has won 19 of 20 murder trials.
Tough lawyer, very able, very prepared, very, very able.
Johnny Cochran was talking to jurors, and Marcia Clark was talking at jurors.
Marcia Clark was somebody who thought she knew everything, and she was arrogant and overconfident.
I can only reiterate that.
No, you don't need to reiterate if I've already heard it.
I apologize to the court. I thought that.
I mean, I can't keep doing these things over and over and over again.
She was, I would say, a tigress as a trial attorney. She had taken on tough cases under adverse circumstances and held up and prevailed. She was very facile with trace evidence cases, hair fiber, DNA, and the like.
The mere fact that we find blood where there should be no blood, in the defendant's car, in his house, in the driveway, and even on the socks in his very bedroom, at the foot of his bed, that trail of blood from Bundy through his own Ford Bronco and into his house in Rockingham is devastating proof of his guilt. And the results of the analysis of that blood confirms what the rest of the evidence will show. That on June the 12th, 1994, after a violent relationship in which the defendant beat her, humiliated her, and controlled her, after he took her youth, her freedom, and her self-respect, just as she tried to break free, Orenthal James Simpson took her very life in what amounted to his final and his ultimate act of control. And in that final and terrible act, Ronald Goldman, an innocent bystander, was viciously and senselessly murdered.
As the first week of the trial unfolds, Johnny Cochran gives the opening statement for the defense. O.J. Simpson's lead attorney tells the jury the central themes of their case: sloppy police work and a rush to judgment.
The opening statement is not opening argument, but that's just that, opening statement. If you've had occasion to go to a movie, you know that there's something called the previews of coming attractions. And that's what this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a guide, our roadmap, if you will, what we expect the evidence to show.
Johnny Cochran was a brilliant lawyer.
And here we are now in this search for justice. You hear a lot about this talk about justice.
His firm at that time was all civil rights police misconduct work, all civil litigation, no criminal.
Johnny Cochran, of course, had tremendous appeal as a trial lawyer, particularly within the African-American community.
I guess Dr. Martin Luther King said it best when he said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so we are now embarked upon this search for justice, this search for truth.
We're going from California back to the South. I wanted to go to this bathroom, and I wasn't mindful of any that, you know, blacks go one place, whites go another. And so I was going to go in this bathroom. This guy said, "You can't go in there, boy." That let me know there was a problem, and I remember talking to my dad about that. And I was troubled by that, and again, that just reinforced my belief in that things should change and my desire to change things. My whole career has been trying to represent people who need to be represented, whose civil rights have been violated.
Johnny Cochran understands that on the heels of the Rodney King beating by Los Angeles police officers and the subsequent trial, the riots are a symptom of something bigger. LA is engulfed with tension, torn apart by racial animus, and policed by a department many fear instead of trust.
As a city, we were still really raw. We were still really feeling that pain that had just happened.
I knew Johnny Cochran for years as a friend and as a brilliant litigator who specialized in civil rights cases and believed strongly in the presumption of innocence. What most people didn't know was that Johnny's standard approach was to put the evidence on trial, question the investigators' professionalism and their motives. As Johnny told me one night at dinner, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Let me try to set the record straight for you. This glove was not found by them or the officers or whatever. This glove was found by Detective Furman.
The defense strategy was, you can't trust the message if you can't trust the messenger.
Detective Mark Furman will play an integral part in this case for a number of reasons. Now, it's very interesting that the prosecution never once mentioned his name yesterday. It's like they just want to hide him. But they can't hide him. He's very much a part of this case. We can only ask ourselves, why didn't they mention him? I think that answer will become very clear to you as the case progresses.
We proved that there was a rush to judgment, that the messengers were the LAPD, that they had made up their mind about who did this.
It didn't matter what the world thought. It mattered what those 12 jurors thought. And Johnny Cochran never lost sight of the fact that he was playing to those jurors.
This case is about a rush to judgment. There's a rush to judgment here. But they didn't want to listen because they made their decision in this rush to judgment. But as jurors, I'm sure you're not going to rush to judgment.
Johnny Cochran easily was the guy that I would have hired to join me if I'd been first in the case.
I mentioned before this crime scene and the number of people who were allowed to walk through there, many with just their shoes on, walking right through the blood. Some had gloves, some didn't have gloves. Picking up the evidence, which will become very relevant and important to you as you hear from the experts about the contamination aspect of this and what it means, how easy it is, a sneeze, a touch, whatever, for this evidence to become contaminated.
The defense's strategy was to paint the law enforcement agents as bungling idiots, but yet they were smart enough to frame an innocent man, but they were too stupid to pull it off correctly.
We think the evidence will show that this scene was tracked and traipsed up, and the gathering of evidence was a complete disaster. And the evidence will show that the careless, slipshod, negligent collection, handling, and processing of samples by basically poorly trained personnel from LAPD has contaminated, compromised, and corrupted the DNA evidence in this case. This is, by all accounts, 21st century cyberspace technology that is being used by these police departments with covered wagon technology. The fact that blood mysteriously appears on vital pieces of evidence, and it's predicted what the results will be regarding DNA when that evidence is still in the police lab, is devastating evidence of something far more sinister.
I want you all to remember that your conduct here will have an impact not only upon the welfare of your respective clients, but upon the image of our profession for many years to come. Those who say the criminal justice system itself is on trial may be correct in that observation.
I am absolutely appalled.
The people have a right to know.
They cannot shut me up.
They've been lied to.
I'm not going to hear it again. I've ruled.
They've been deceived.
That's why they lose cases sometimes.
Did you hear what I said about 2 minutes ago?
I got a phone call from Bob Shapiro saying, we'd like you to join the defense team. And I said, no, I can't because I've already commented that I believe he's guilty. And Bob said, well, everybody thinks he's guilty.
The defense team is packed with big egos and some bold ideas on how to defend O.J. Simpson. Some of them Judge Ito allows, and some of them he doesn't.
Probably be times when I'd like Mr. Simpson to be able to approach the jury to demonstrate certain things that I think are very relevant in the course of that opening statement.
It is only a blatant attempt to impress the jury with his charisma and star appeal.
The motion to allow him to exhibit to the jury his knee injuries or the result of the scarring and the surgeries will be allowed.
And I'd like, at this point, have Mr. Simpson come over to the jury so I can demonstrate the problem with his knees.
This is an incredible moment. The person, O.J. Simpson, who's up for double murder, by the way, gets to walk up to the jury box right next to the jurors. Yeah, there are a few deputies there, but he's not in shackles. And he's making a connection with the jury out of the gate in opening statements. It's a huge advantage for the defense, and this is right out of the gate. Judge Ito allows this, unprecedented.
You have to look at circumstantial evidence. So the dog and the plaintiff whale and the evidence that was given by the dog walker, they just try to establish a timeline. And the timeline is loose because you don't know exactly when somebody was killed. You try to determine it based upon what else is going on and what else people are hearing or seeing.
Both sides fight hard to get the jury to believe their timeline for the night of the murders. The defense has to account for O.J.'s whereabouts at the time of the killings. The prosecution has to pinpoint the time of death based on a dog.
Now, what I'm about to describe to you is a series of events that proves that the murders occurred between 9:35 and 10:45 on the night of June the 12th. At approximately 9:50 p.m., Ron Goldman left the restaurant still dressed in his waiter's uniform, the white dress shirt, the black pants, and the black shoes. And his friends at the restaurant never again saw him alive.
She described for you how he was dressed. I think she said with some white shirt and black pants or whatever. You saw those pictures as terrible as they were. He was in some jeans and some kind of shoes that are far different. And the evidence will be he went home, dropped off a book, changed clothes before he came to Nicole Brown Simpson. But the reason that you weren't told those facts is because it's important they keep this 10:15 time.
10:15, Pablo Fenbez heard a dog bark. He remembered it clearly because the bark was like a plaintive, insistent wail. It was like nothing he'd ever heard before.
Ms. Clark kept telling you that she had to fix the time of death in this case at about, what'd she say, about 10:15? She had to make it 10:15, and she made it based upon a dog's wail. Now, this is the first case you'll ever hear where the prosecution's theory is that you've got to determine the cause of the time of death by a dog's wail.
What he noticed when he pulled to that area that was right in his field of view is that there was no car parked there. No white Ford Bronco. And it was 10:39.
She said to you that the limousine driver, when he came and left to take Mr. Simpson to the airport, she told you that he did not see the Bronco parked there. It's not exactly what he said in his testimony at the preliminary hearing in the grand jury.
At 10:45, Cato was talking to his girlfriend Rachel when suddenly he heard on the wall where the air conditioner was 3 loud thumps.
They've got to keep everything squashed in there so they could tell you, oh, we had plenty of time to commit this crime. When we conclude today, you're going to see there was no time to commit this crime. And they have to tell you that it's about a dog's wail when a man's life is at stake.
Was OJ physically capable of stabbing Ron and Nicole in such a short period of time? Now, the prosecution has a workout video that OJ made 2 weeks before the murders. The defense claims OJ was having an arthritis flare-up that made him too weak to commit the murders.
There will be testimony that O.J. Simpson suffers with chronic rheumatoid arthritis. When it's in an acute phase, he has great trouble functioning. We expect there will be testimony that on the date of June 12th, Mr. Simpson was involved in the acute phase of his rheumatoid arthritis. And on that date, after he had played golf, the problems with his hands were so severe he could not shuffle the cards where he played gin rummy at the country club thereafter.
Mr. Cochran made some comments to you about the defendant's alleged arthritic condition. According to him, the defendant's arthritic condition became acute sometime after he played golf and after he'd been swinging the golf club on the evening of June the 12th at about 10 p.m. He said at some point after that, the arthritic condition became acute. Mr. Cochran told you that the defendant's physical capabilities are very limited as a result of that condition. The prosecution will show you evidence to the contrary. We will show you outtakes of an exercise videotape which was made by the defendant only 2 weeks before the murders. We will show you a portion of that videotape to demonstrate just what the defendant's physical capabilities really were on the evening of June the 12th, 1994.
Get real. Let's try it one more time. Okay, go. Oh, see. All right. After all of these years, you know what I mean?
The defendant prided himself in that tape on being in good physical condition. You will see him doing push-ups. You will see him lifting his arms overhead.
Stretch the upper body by reaching for a light, or reaching for the air.
You will see him stretching.
This is a chest stretch. Just get those arms back, push them out, push that chest out there.
We're going to show you that tape during the course of this trial.
The days were very intense, and they began first thing in the morning and went well into the night. In addition, for a little bit of time to think of other discussion, excuse me, I need to slow down myself a little bit, Your Honor. Give me just a moment. Yesterday, the other day, the court said it had to take a deep breath. Allow me to take one, too.
I've had long experience with Mr. Hodgman. I've known him as a colleague and as a trial lawyer, and I've never seen the expressions on his face that I've seen today. What I'm asking you to do is take a few deep breaths, evaluate what you have, and then come to me with a proposal as to how we proceed tomorrow morning. And I suspect you may unplug your computer and take it home with you tonight.
It may be a long time before I get home tonight, Your Honor.
He was disoriented. Later, he was complaining about chest pains and other physical symptoms.
We were working until approximately 1:30 in the morning, and we were doing so without the benefit of the assistance of Mr. Hodgman, who was taken to the hospital at I believe, approximately 6 p.m.
I discovered as a result of getting tested that apparently I had an abnormality in the musculature of my heart, which had proved fatal for certain athletes historically, and I had the same thing. So that was an awkward and kind of shocking revelation.
All right, guys. Okay. All right, guys. See you guys. I'm gone.
The scene outside the courthouse looks more like a circus than a trial.
Ladies and gentlemen, please let me get to the car so we can go.
There really hadn't been frenzies like that before, where there was just 24/7 coverage, where there were dozens and dozens and dozens of cameras.
The scene is much the same immediately outside of the courtroom.
The scene in and around the courthouse I would characterize as just crazy. And I remember Marsha and I looked at each other, and the thought that passed between us was, we can't do this.
Inside the courtroom, a single camera is mounted on the wall above the jury box. It opens up the trial to a worldwide audience of 50 million viewers.
It was really the first case of its kind where people could watch from start to finish and watch it unfold and be frustrated because this was a real-life soap opera.
The headlines are everywhere, but looking at the coverage, it's almost like the country is watching two different trials. On the one hand, the trial shines a spotlight on mainstream media's racial blind spot, starts a national conversation about domestic abuse, and the reality that African American and white communities have vastly different experiences and impressions when it comes to law enforcement. On the other hand is the Los Angeles Sentinel, one of the oldest black-owned weekly newspapers in the country. It breaks with the national media and covers the trial with a clear pro-defense perspective. Its articles are syndicated coast to coast to other African American papers.
The perception that Black America had about this case was largely filtered through the LA Sentinel, in distinction to, say, the more mainstream coverage of the case.
The Sentinel always carried the news and from a perspective of the African American community. So it was nothing new to us that the Sentinel was front and center in terms of carrying the story, and the story that was coming from us that was best known to us.
The Sentinel faces head-on the issue of race as a factor in the Simpson trial, in a way that is very different from national news organizations.
The LA Sentinel started with the presupposition that we cannot believe anything the police say, and that they have to prove what they're saying before we're going to believe them.
It appears that Mr. Cochran and I, the only two black lead lawyers on each side of the counsel table, are somehow dragged into this issue to argue the issue to the court. And I think that may be due in some part to the fact that if anybody should slip and say or utter the word, it's probably better to have a black person do it. If a white male takes the witness stand and that word is uttered in this courtroom, it will offend every black juror on this case and any other African American within earshot. It is so prejudicial and so extremely inflammatory that to use that word will evoke some type of emotional response from any African American.
I would be remiss were I not at this time to take this opportunity to respond to my good friend, Mr. Chris Darden. His remarks this morning are perhaps the most incredible remarks I've heard in the court of law. His remarks are demeaning to African Americans as a group. And so I want to apologize to African Americans across this country. Not every African American feels that way. It's demeaning to our jurors to say that African Americans who've lived under oppression for 200 plus years in this country cannot work within the mainstream, cannot hear these offensive words. African Americans live with offensive words, offensive looks, offensive treatment every day of their lives. But yet they still believe in this country. And to say that our jurors, because they hear this offensive word, they hear every day that people call, if they interact with people. We've heard this in the questionnaires. To say they can't be fair is absolutely outrageous.
Week one of the People versus O.J. Simpson ends with the prosecution on the defensive. But when the first prosecution witnesses testify, the defense goes after one of them only to have that effort backfire in a big way. That's next on week two of OJ25. I'm Roger Cossack.